The Revenge of Dr. Cruel, carnival of disgusting horse crab monsters versus the leech people. Do you love these movies too? My brother Tyler and I bought the videos, and we watch them all the time. We love all scary movies, but these 3 movies were made by R.B. Faraday, and he is our favorite. We watch his TV show Nightmare House every week. We go to his movies, then we buy them on video. I guess you figured it out, we are R.B. Faraday fans. One day last winter, Dad came home with a big smile on his face. I have something you might be interested in, Andrew, he said to me. Pulled a folded up brochure from his overcoat pocket, handed it to me. I unfolded it and read the big words on the front. R.B. Faraday's Fright Camp. I guess it in shock. He's opening a summer camp. I choked out. Dad nodded. I called Tyler in and held the brochure up in front of his face. Can we go? Can we? He cried. Can we go this summer? Dad nodded again. Then the whole Herman house went berserk. Tyler and I were leaping up and down, screaming at the top of our lungs. Mom and Dad were laughing. What a happy moment. Let me see that. Tyler cried. He tried to grab the camp brochure from my hand and ripped it in two. Whoa, easy guys, easy, Dad warned. Just what a fright camp needs, Mom muttered. 2 more out of control monsters. Mom always called Tyler and me monsters when we get a little enthusiastic. I'm 12 and Tyler is 10, but she thinks we should act like adults at all times. That'd be kinda boring, wouldn't it? After we stopped leaping around the house, screaming and bouncing off the walls like pinballs, Dad helped us tape the brochure pages back together. I don't know, Andrew, he said, handing me the brochure. This camp looks pretty scary. You and Tyler might be too frightened. I rolled my eyes. For sure. Yeah, I'm shaking, Tyler exclaimed. He pretended to be scared, making his whole body quiver like jello. Tyler is good at that. He's skinny as a worm and very loose and acrobatic. We both have short, straight brown hair and round, dark eyes, but I always look serious and Tyler almost always looks goofy. He's always twisting himself up, making faces and making kids laugh. We were both serious as we studied the camp brochure. We were so excited we couldn't speak. The camp had everything: the haunted forest, the lake and the water zombies. Wow, how will we ever wait till July? I cried. I wish I could close my eyes and it would be summer now, Tyler declared. Of course, we didn't have any way of knowing that the camp would be a little different from what we expected. We had no way of knowing just how frightening Fright Camp would be, and we had no way of knowing what was waiting for us there, deep at the bottom of the cavern of no return. Chapter 2. Whoa, Tyler and I cheered as the camp bus hit another bump, and we all flew up out of our seats. Do you think R.B. Faraday designed this bus? Meredith Friedman asked. She and her sister Elizabeth had the seat behind Tyler and me. We met them when we got on. They seemed pretty nice, except Elizabeth kept popping blue bubblegum bubbles and spraying the back of my head with spit, and Meredith kept calling me Andy. Nobody calls me Andy, everyone calls me Andrew. The camp bus of no return, Tyler declared. No, Revenge of the Speed Demon, Meredith suggested. Can't bust monsters from outer space, Elizabeth cried. We all stared at her. R.B. Faraday would never come up with a tacky title like that. Elizabeth blushed. The bus swerved around a curve. Nothing but platforms out there, mile after mile of green fields. Are we there yet? A boy called from the back of the bus. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? We all began to chant it over and over. Soon tall trees replaced the flat fields. The highway curved into a thick forest. We show a different R.B. Faraday movie every night, Meredith declared. Isn't that cool? Tyler and I have seen them all, I bragged, at least 6 times. But I want to see them all again, Tyler chimed in. Elizabeth suddenly looked worried. It isn't all scary, is it? She asked. I mean, we could do some normal camp things, right? Meredith snickered. What do you want to do, Lizzie? Make beaded necklaces and origami animals and arts and crafts? Elizabeth blushed again while I opened my mouth to say something, but the bus jolted and squealed and slid hard. I fell into the aisle. I heard Tyler scream. Other kids cried out. I bounced on the floor as the bus skidded to a screeching stop. Some kids were shouting in shock. Others were laughing. I started to pull myself back up to my seat, and I nearly fell again when I heard the driver utter an angry cry. I heard gasps, turned to the front of the bus, and saw someone force his way through the front bus door. A man in black from head to foot, wide-brimmed black hat over a black mask, black sweatshirt over black pants. Hey, you're not supposed to be on here, the driver screamed angrily. The man in black growled something. I couldn't hear what he said. Get off now, the driver ordered. The man reached out black-gloved hands. He grabbed the driver by the front of the shirt and lifted him out of his seat. Hey, the driver protested. He was a short, skinny guy and pretty old. He had white hair and wore thick glasses, but he started wrestling with the man in black, grunting and groaning, trying to shove him back out the bus door. Some kids were screaming, but Tyler and I watched in shocked silence. My heart thudded in my chest. I could feel my throat tighten. What was this about? The 2 men banged against one side of the bus, then wrestled up to the windshield. The driver's face was bright red. The man had him in a chokehold. Get away, kids, the driver gasped. Get away fast. No one moved. I stared in horror as the man in black lifted the scrawny bus driver off the floor and heaved him out the bus door. Through the window I could see him roll off the pavement onto the dirt at the side of the road. He landed face down in the dirt and didn't move. I turned to the front. The man in black slid into the driver's seat. He slammed the bus door shut. With the squealing tires, the bus roared back onto the highway. We hit a bump. I flew off the seat. My head crashed into the roof. I saw Tyler slam into the seat in front of us. Kids were screaming. I heard a few kids crying. Stop it, stop the bus, a girl shrieked. Let us out, the girl next to her demanded. The bus swerved hard, sending several kids tumbling into the aisle. A new driver hunched over the wheel, ignored all the screams and cries. We picked up speed. Who is he? Meredith cried, leaning over our seat back. Where is he taking us? Chapter 3. A big truck roared past, honking his horn. We swerved again. Kids cried and screamed. Suddenly Tyler started to laugh. What's so funny? Elizabeth stammered. Don't you get it? Tyler cried. He had to shout over the screams of the kids. It's all an act, huh? Gripping the seat back, the two sisters gaped at him, open mouthed. Yes, I cried happily. Yes, I get it. I grinned at my brother. This is exactly what happened in Vacation of Endless Doom. A crazed zombie kidnaps a bus of campers and drives off with them forever. Drives and drives until the end of time, till the kids actually scream their heads off. Right, Tyler exclaimed. We slapped each other a high five. It's just an act, I told the two girls, part of the fun. We're probably getting close to camp. The bus swerved hard again. Kids shrieked and begged the driver to stop. I really don't think it's fun, Meredith sniffed. It's a fright camp, remember, Tyler said. It's supposed to be frightening, but this is going too far, she insisted. Her sister settled back in the seat, eyes shut, arms tightly crossed in front of her. It's all a joke, I told them again. You watch, the guy in black is gonna pull into the camp, and then he'll probably tear off his black mask and welcome us. Hey, check it out, Tyler pointed out the window as we roared past the blur of trees. I saw a tall sign for the camp, showed a headless school. This way to your doom, it proclaimed in red letters. A green arrow dripping like slime pointed straight ahead. See, I cried, the driver's taking us right to fright camp, I knew it. Are you sure? Elizabeth stammered, still hugging herself. Of course, I replied. I pointed out the bouncing bus window. Look, there's the entrance. We all stared at the dripping green arrow pointing to a wide driveway. Enter here. Yes, Tyler and I slapped another high five. A hush fell over the bus. Everyone stared out the window, watching for the driver to turn into the camp. A huge green entrance arrow loomed up in front of us, and then it slid by our windows as we sped past. No! Loud groans rose over the roar of the bus. You missed the turn, I shouted to the driver. Go back, some kids shrieked. I could see the entrance shine, soon smaller and smaller out the back window. We hit a hard bump and rumbled along the highway. Hunched over the big wheel, the driver clicked on the loudspeaker. His voice boomed over the bus, low and evil. Sit back, kids, we're not going to camp. I have other plans for you. Chapter 4. Screams rang out, cries of horror. Let us out, stop the bus, stop it, stop. Where are we going? Tyler and I exchanged terrified glances. We were both so sure the whole thing was an act, but now the bus was carrying us farther and farther from the camp. We both hunched down in the seat. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. Where is he taking us? Tyler murmured, but before I could answer, the bus swerved again. We were all thrown to the right as the bus turned sharply onto a gravel path. The gravel crackled under the tires as we sped along the path. Tall, dark trees, a forest of trees bounced past on both sides. He's taking us deep into the forest, I heard Elizabeth stammer in a tiny voice, but suddenly the trees ended. The bus bounced into a flat green field. A long wood rail fence stretched across the field. I could see low cabins and other buildings on the sloping hill beyond the fence, and then a white gate, a painted sign above the gate. Welcome to Fright Camp. Huh? I cried. Are we really at camp? The bus finally slowed. It pulled to a stop in front of a long wooden building that looked like a big log cabin. The driver sat up straight and clicked on the loudspeaker again. Well, welcome to Fright Camp, everyone. Did I give you a scare? Yes, everyone cried. I heard loud sighs of relief. I started to laugh. I couldn't keep it in. A lot of kids were laughing. Now I glanced around the bus. Some kids had grown very pale. Some had tear stains on the cheeks. Two girls were still crying. This is the real entrance to the camp, the driver announced. The other entrance sign back on the highway is a phony. He pulled off his black mask. He was a young guy with short blonde hair and two teeth that stuck out of his mouth. He looked like a rabbit. Hope I give you a good scare, he grinned. Of course, this was just the first. His grin grew wider. It gets a lot scarier than this. Several counselors were waiting to welcome us. They all wore green t-shirts and shorts the color of green slime. I jumped off the bus and stretched my arms and legs. It felt so good to breathe fresh air and to be off that bus. As I followed the others to the big log cabin, the main lodge, I gazed around. Wow, down the hill, I could see a spinning scream ride. That must be the ride from Carnival of Disgusting Horrors, I told Tyler. He didn't hear me. He was talking to two other kids from the bus. They were pointing excitedly at the go-kart track back near the trees. That's a track from go-karts from the evil kingdom, I told myself. I was so excited I could barely walk. Being here at Fright Camp was like living in one of R.B. Faraday's movies. Squinting in the bright sunlight, I saw rows of small cabins and buildings. They led down to a sandy beach and a sparkling blue lake. Is that the lake of the water zombies? I wondered. What movie do you think they'll show tonight? The kid behind me asked. Do we get to go swimming? I'm hot. Do you think R.B. Faraday is here? He's supposed to be. It said so in the brochure. Will we get to meet him? Are those real caves in those rocks? Excited voices all around me. I wanted to run around and see and do everything, but the counselors herded us into the lodge. We had to register and sign up for activities. I chose movie appreciation, swimming, and horror poster art. I searched for Tyler and saw him way behind me in line. He was still talking to the two guys from the bus. Meredith and Elizabeth were behind him. I could see them arguing about what activities to choose. We had to sign a bunch of papers. Then we had to check off the foods we liked on a long list and fill out a form for the camp nurse. Finally, we were assigned cabins. Tyler and I were assigned to cabin 3. I found it about halfway down the hill toward the lake. The cabin was small, 2 bunk beds and 2 dressers. Kids had already claimed the bunk by the window. They had stuff piled on the bed and on the dresser beside it. I wondered who our roommates were. Hey, Andrew, when do we get to explore? Tyler asked. Do you think we can ride the go-karts whenever we want? I finished stuffing my clothes into a drawer. Then I shoved my camp trunk under a bunk. Let's go find out, I replied, wiping sweat off my forehead. We stepped out of the cabin and bumped into a counselor. He was tall, very skinny, and he looked like a broom handle with blonde hair on top. Hey guys, he greeted us. I'm Gus. I'm the counselor for cabin 3. He had a nice smile. Tyler and I introduced ourselves. Cabin 3 rocks, Gus exclaimed enthusiastically. Cabin 3 rules. Did you meet Jack and Chris? They're your bunkmates. Why don't you do some exploring? Have a look around. Okay, Tyler and I cried out happily. We started down the hill. Just one thing, Gus called after us. We turned back to him. Don't go to the cabin and no return, he warned. His blue eyes flashed. Know why? I took a guess. Because we won't return? Gus laughed. You got it. Then his smile faded. Be careful, guys, really, he said, lower in his voice. This camp, well, it isn't what it seems. Huh? What do you mean? Tyler demanded, but Gus didn't reply. He turned and trotted up the path toward the law. Tyler and I spun around, trying to decide which direction to go first. Down the row of cabins, kids were still dragging their suitcases and trunks. Excited voices floated over the warm summer air. A few guys started a tetherball game around a pole near the top of the hill. I saw a group of girls talking and laughing outside the cabin door. Tyler and I followed a path toward the trees. I bent to swat a bug on my leg. When I stood up, I saw that we were in front of a sign. Arrows pointing in all directions to different areas of the camp. The haunted forest straight ahead, lake of the water zombies to the right, bottomless quicksand pit of screams to the left, the mine of lost souls, the cavern, no return. Ghost cabin, arrows pointed left and right. Wow, everything from R.B. Faraday's movies, Tyler exclaimed. It's all here, and we're in it. I opened my mouth to reply, but a shrill cry made me stop. I spun around, and Tyler heard it too. A scream, help me, somebody! A boy's terrified voice, please help me! Chapter 5. We both turned toward the trees. I saw a red-haired boy's hand. It was stuck in something round and white. Help me! Tyler and I raced toward them. The boy squirmed to struggle. His hand, it was caught in a wasp nest. I could hear the angry buzz of the wasp. The boy twisted and pulled, but he couldn't free his hand. Oh, help! Help! He moaned. The sting in me! The sting in me! Tyler and I ran across the grass, turned and saw 2 others running after us. Meredith and Elizabeth, grasping for breath, we all reached the boy at the same time. What's happening? Elizabeth cried. How did he do that? Just help! The boy groaned. He struggled and squirmed. Sweat poured down his face. His red hair was matted wetly to his forehead. He gave a hard tug, but the hand wouldn't come free. It's swollen from all the stings, he moaned. Let me try, I said. I took a deep breath. Then I raised both hands and grabbed the sides of the wasp nest. Go ahead, pull out your hand, I instructed him. The wasp buzzed angrily inside the white nest. Please don't sting me, I thought, please. The buzzing rose to a roar, my hands trembled. I gripped the wasp nest tightly, my eyes shut, every muscle tense. Hurry, pull, I pleaded. I'm holding it. A smile crossed the boy's face. He slid his hand out easily. He held it up, not red or swollen, no stings. He tossed back his head and laughed. We all uttered startled cries. I pulled the wasp nest closer to examine it. Plastic appeared inside. The angry buzzing sound came from a tiny speaker. It's a joke, the boy said. My friend and I discovered it this morning. I uttered an angry cry and swung the wasp nest as hard as I could. The tree branch swung with it. The plastic nest was wired to the tree. The boy introduced himself. His name was Jack Harding. He wore black shorts and a gray t-shirt with fright camping and dripping blood red letters. My friend Chris and I got here this morning, he told us, smoothing back his red hair. You in cabin 3? I asked. He nodded. We are in the same cabin, I declared. So is Tyler. Cool, Jack replied. I've been exploring all day. This camp is awesome, especially if you like scary stuff. Well, of course we like scary stuff, Meredith replied. Why else would we come to a fright camp? Was everything fake? Elizabeth demanded before Jack could answer. Another boy stepped out of the woods. He had long black hair pulled back into a ponytail. He was a big and athletic looking, also wore a fright camp t-shirt over baggy shorts. Hey, Jack greeted him. This is my friend Christian Kretschmer. You can call me Chris, he said, pulling a bug out of his black hair and flicking it at Jack. A real bug. I pulled the wasp drug, Jack told him. They fell for it. Chris snickered. Cool. Chris and I have been all over this place, Jack said. He pulled up a long blade of grass from the ground and began sucking on it. So is everything a fake? Elizabeth repeated. Is it all just a joke? Jack's smile faded. Not everything, he replied, moving the grass blade around in his mouth. That's what's so scary about this camp, Chris added. Some of it is real. Like what? Tyler asked. The 2 boys hesitated. They glanced at each other. Maybe you should find out for yourselves, Chris said quietly. No, tell us, I insisted. What's real? Well, Jack pulled the blade of grass from his mouth and tossed it on the ground. Over there, he said. That's real. He point pointed, I saw a wide circle of yellow sand cut into the grass, wooden signs stood beside it, but I couldn't read the words. It's the quicksand pit, Chris said. Huh? It's real, I cried. Jack and Chris both nodded. We heard that a counselor got caught in it last week. Before camp opened, Chris said in a whisper. His eyes darted tensely back and forth. The poor guy got sucked right down. You're kidding, I said. I studied the solemn faces. You're kidding, right? I demanded. That's another joke, right? Jack glanced nervously at the quicksand pit. We'll see. Chapter 6, Tyler and I explored a little while longer. We checked out the beach and the lake, but I kept glancing back at the quicksand pit. Was Jack pulling another joke on us? Tyler ran to join the kids he met on the bus. As I started back to the cabin, I heard whistles blowing. Camp meeting in the lodge. A green uniformed counselor called out, all campers to the lodge. Kids came jogging in from all directions. I waved to Jack and Chris as I made my way through the open doorway. The front of the lodge was built to look like a log cabin, but the building was actually 2 stories tall and as big as a barn. To the left, I could see a row of small rooms down a long hallway. We were herded into an enormous room with wooden rafters along the ceiling and tall stone fireplaces on both ends. Long wooden tables filled the center of the room. A sign proclaimed mess hall and meeting room. Movie posters of R.B. Faraday's films were hung along one wall. I recognized the beast with 3 brains and Kunga, the animal vampire. The counselors motioned for us to sit at the long tables. I found a seat in the second row of tables next to some older looking guys. I started to say something to them, but a tall athletic looking counselor stepped in front of us. Both hands on the table, guys, he instructed. Fast, hands on the tables. Whoa, I uttered a startled cry as he pulled up heavy black cords from under the table and strapped them around our wrists. Handcuffs, one of the other kids cried. Are we under arrest? Someone called. We all laughed at that, but I felt a little strange as counselors moved quickly along the table, strapping down everyone's hands, and a chill tingled the back of my neck as I felt a hum of electricity run through the black cords. What is this about? I asked the guy next to me. He shrugged. It's pretty weird, he muttered. I tugged at the cords. They were fastened tight. I couldn't slip free. Again, I felt a hum of electricity around my wrists. I turned and glanced behind me. I saw Meredith and Elizabeth at the next table. Their wrists were strapped down. They were chatting excitedly, both talking at once. In the row behind them, I saw Chris struggling with the counselors. No way, he shouted, no way. He wrapped his hands behind his back and jumped to his feet. You can't do this, he cried angrily. But 3 counselors held Chris down. They pulled his hands apart and strapped his wrist. A troublemaker, one of the counselors said. What's your name? We're gonna remember you. I don't believe this, I muttered to the boy next to me. Why is Chris so frightened? The boy shrugged. Beat me. I didn't have long to think about it. Big tough looking man in a white lab coat stepped to the front of the room. He raised 2 enormous hands to silence us. Welcome, prisoners, he bellowed. We all laughed in comfortable laughter. 2 counselors rushed up to him. They both pointed to Chris. Man in the lab coat stared long and hard at Chris. The man had cold gray eyes and a broad bulby nose that looked as if it had been broken several times. He was nearly bald. A dark scar started at one eyebrow and trailed up along his forehead. He raised his hands until the room grew silent. My name is Alonzo, he announced. I am the assistant warden. Warden? Prisoners? What's going on here? I wondered, but then I saw a smile spread over Alonzo's face. His gray eyes twinkled. Welcome to Fright Camp, everyone, he declared. He rubbed his hands together. We are gonna do our best to give you some good scares this summer. Why are our hands strapped down? A boy demanded in an angry, trembling voice. I turned and saw that it was Jack. Yeah, let us go, Chris cried angrily. You can't do this. Let us go. I felt a tingle of electricity against my wrist. Alonzo glared at my 2 bunkmates. What are your names? He demanded. Jack and Chris did in reply. Your names? Alonzo repeated, lumbering toward them menacingly. The 2 boys called out their names. And what cabin are you in? Alonzo asked. They both hesitated. Cabin 3, Chris told him finally. A strange, unpleasant grin spread over Alonzo's face. The scar on his forehead throbbed. That will be a lucky cabin, he declared coldly. Chapter 7. Alonzo turned and strode back to the front of the room. I have a wonderful treat for you now, he announced in his deep, booming voice. I have the pleasure of introducing the owner of Fright Camp. His 35 movies have won him the title of Scariest Man on Earth. Let's give a big Fright Camp welcome to R.B. Faraday. I tried to clap, but the tight cords around my wrists made it hard, so I cheered instead. We all cheered and screamed as R.B. Faraday shuffled into the room. I heard a few kids gasp in surprise. He wasn't the way we pictured him. For one thing, he was very short. He only came up to Alonzo's shoulders. He wasn't just short, he was tiny. A small, slender head topped with slick down black hair, a closely trimmed black beard with a streak of gray down the center. He wore a black t-shirt, black shorts, and sandals. His legs were as skinny as toothpicks, so were his arms. Saw something sparkle against the front of his shirt. Squinting, saw that it was a silvery skull on a chain with glittering red eyes. I leaned over the table staring at him. My hero, the most famous horror director on earth, couldn't believe I was in the same room as he was. Mr. Faraday pulled himself onto a tall wooden stool. He had a clipboard in one hand. He scratched his beard with the other hand, waiting for our cheers to stop. thank you for the warm welcome, he said finally. I leaned forward, straining to listen. He had a soft, almost whispery voice. This is an exciting summer for me, he continued. He spread the clipboard across his bony knees. As Alonzo told you, I've made 35 movies, but that's only film. Color images on celluloid. This camp gives me a chance to bring my movies to life. And now you will all be the actors. We cheered again. The cords tugged at my wrist. Why are we wearing these? I called out. Several other kids chimed in. The big room echoed with the questions. Alonzo signaled sternly for us to be quiet, but Mr. Faraday rubbed his beard and smiled. Have any of you seen my film, The Revenge of Dr. Cruel? He asked. Several kids cried out yes. Then you will recognize the fear meter, Mr. Faraday said. These wires connect all of you to the actual fear meter that was used in the movie. But what does it do? A girl called from the front row. I will show you, Mr. Faraday replied. He slid down the stool and turned to Alonzo. Why don't you pick a volunteer? Alonzo rumbled up to the tables. He fiddled with the cuffs of his white lab coat. His gray eyes swept back and forth over the room. He really looked like an evil doctor in one of R.B. Faraday's movies, I thought. Hadn't seen The Revenge of Dr. Cruel in a long time. I struggled to remember exactly what the fear meter did. Alonzo raised a big hand and pointed. Let's demonstrate on that one, Alonzo said. One of the troublemakers. No, I heard Chris scream. No, not me. He struggled to free his hands from the cords. Please, not me. Why is he so afraid? I wondered. Kids shifted and squirmed. All eyes were on Chris now. I caught the frightened expressions on Elizabeth and Meredith's faces. Behind them, Jack had his eyes shut tight. I turned back to the front row and saw Mr. Faraday push some buttons on a control panel. Then he threw a big switch on the wall. No, Chris gasped. I heard a sharp crack of electricity. Chris stood his head in his seat. He said snap back. He jumped up, his whole body twisted and danced. Another hard jolt of electricity. Kids screamed, horrified cries shook the room. I let out a laugh. It's a joke, I told the boy next to me. It's gotta be a joke. But Chris's head snapped to one side, and then his whole body collapsed. He crumpled onto the table and didn't move. Chapter 8. Shut it down, Mr. Faraday screamed. He fiddled frantically with the control buttons. Alonzo leaned over Chris and shook him by the shoulders. Some kids screamed, others stayed in silence. I guessed for breath, my heart pounding, watching Alonzo try to revive Chris. Is he okay? Mr. Faraday demanded. Is he alive? He'll survive, Alonzo replied coldly. He motioned to two counselors. Take him out of here. Alonzo loosened the straps. The two counselors lifted Chris's limp body from the seat. They had a lot of trouble pulling up and almost dropped him. No one uttered a sound as the counselors carried Chris from the room. The door closed hard behind them. Mr. Faraday rubbed his beard and paced back and forth in front of the fireplace. He motioned for Alonzo to join him. We better turn down the voltage for the next group, Mr. Faraday told his assistant, shaking his head. Alonzo rubbed his hands together. An evil smile crossed his face. It's more fun this way, he declared. Mr. Faraday stopped hissing, stared at him. You're too evil, Alonzo. Don't make me sorry I hired you for this job. Alonzo's grin grew wider. Don't make me sorry I took the job, he shot back. Mr. Faraday shook his head again. Maybe I should have left you rotting in that prison cell. Maybe you haven't changed after all. Huh? Prison cell, I thought. Swallowed hard. Why is Mr. Faraday saying all this? Has he forgotten we can hear him? Is Chris okay? Jack called from the back of the room. Is he gonna be okay? Mr. Faraday and Alonzo glared angrily at each other and didn't reply. Will you take these cords off our wrists now? A girl down the table from me asked. Her question appeared to snap Mr. Faraday from his thoughts. He suddenly remembered we were all sitting there, but he didn't answer her. Sorry, boys and girls, he said instead. My fright camp's brand new, so we're still working out a few problems. He narrowed his eyes again at Alonzo. Problems like you, he added coldly. Alonzo's face turned bright red. He uttered an angry growl. The deep scar on his forehead darkened to purple. Go wheel in a special guest, Mr. Faraday ordered him. He turned back to us. Isn't it strange, he said softly. What happened to that boy Chris is exactly what happened in The Revenge of Dr. Cruel. So strange, he drifted off into his own thoughts. Again, shaking his head, he reminded me of a grasshopper as he climbed back onto the stool. He was so wiry and thin. Lots of kids think my camp is a fake, he told us, tapping one hand against the clipboard. He leaned toward us, but I think horror has to be real. He seemed to stare right at me. His dark eyes burned into mine. I think horror has to be real, or else it isn't scary, he said in a low whisper. I felt a shudder of fear. Is he just saying that to put us in the mood, I wondered, or is he crazy? Chapter 9. I stared back at Mr. Faraday, waiting for him to crack a smile, waiting for him to admit that Chris was only acting, that the jolt of electricity wasn't real, that it was all a joke, but his expression remained solemn. A low rumbling sound made me turn to the doors at the back of the room. The cord strained at my wrists, the door swung open. First I saw metal bars, a cage, then I saw a big dark figure huddled inside the cage. Alonzo and another counselor pushed the cage up to the front of the room. A gorilla, big black eyes poked out from chocolate brown fur. The gorilla gripped the bars of the cage with both hands, bounced up and down, making grunting sounds. Is it real? That was my first question. He looked so human, gripping the bars with his furry fingers, staring out at us. The cage rolled to the front of the room. The creature's mouth dropped open, purple tongue flopped out. It uttered a loud grunt, as if it recognized Mr. Faraday. It's a real gorilla, I realized. It's not a man in a costume. The animal pulled itself up straight as Alonzo spun the cage around to face us. It snarled loudly and pounded the bars with 2 fists. Some little kids at the front table screamed. Mr. Faraday remained on the tall stool. He watched the snarling animal warily. Then he turned to us. "This is our special guest at Fright Camp," he announced. "You're probably surprised to see a gorilla at summer camp. Well, I've planned a lot of surprises for you." "Is that Rocco?" Tyler called out. Mr. Faraday smiled. "You recognize him? Very good. How many of you have seen my movie Conquerors of the Gorilla Planet?" I tried to raise my hand, but the cord tugged it back down. Excited murmurs rose up around the room. That was one of R.B. Faraday's most popular movies. The gorilla's fur bristled. It didn't seem to like the noise. It opened its mouth in another angry snarl and pounded both fists against the bars. "Rocco was the leading man in that movie," Mr. Faraday continued. "He was our best actor, too. We never had to tell him to get scarier, and he worked for peanuts." The gorilla jumped up and down and then tilted its head back in a roar. Mr. Faraday turned to Alonzo. "Be careful with him," he ordered. "Rocco's pretty vicious. He mangled his handler last week. He put the poor guy in the hospital." The gorilla roared again. "Rocco hasn't adapted well to captivity," Mr. Faraday told us. "Gorillas have been known to." The movie director stopped in mid-sentence. His mouth dropped open. The clipboard fell from his hand. "Hey!" With another roar, the gorilla shot both arms forward and swung open the cage door. "Alonzo! You idiot!" Mr. Faraday shrieked. "You left the cage door open! Close it! Close it!" Alonzo dove to the cage door. Too late. Roaring furiously, the gorilla burst out of the cage. Its feet slapped the floor hard. It swung its arms wildly in front of it as if clearing a path for itself. "Stop it! Stop it!" Mr. Faraday's cries rose up over the shrill screams of the campers. Snarling, the gorilla turned his head quickly from side to side, peering down the long table. Alonzo leaped onto the animal's back, but it shrugged him off easily like shaking off a fly. Alonzo toppled heavily to the floor. Mr. Faraday slid off the stool and backed away, backed until he hit the fireplace. "Stop it! Somebody!" he cried. "It's a killer! The gorilla! It's a killer!" A scream escaped my throat. The room rang out with shrieks and cries. I tried to jump up. I saw several kids struggling to get away, but we were all strapped down to the tables. We couldn't move. The gorilla stepped over Alonzo, lumbered up to my table, spread out its massive arms. No, I let out a shrill, terrified scream as its heavy hands closed around me. Chapter 10, I ducked low as the gorilla swung its arms together. I felt a whoosh of air above my head. The fur on one gorilla arm brushed the top of my head. "Oh, hello," moan escaped my throat. I glanced up and saw the big creature lumbering away down the table. It swiped at another boy and then it tossed back its head and let out another roar that shook the rafters. I heard a cry and I spun my head in time to see a tall, lanky green uniformed counselor burst through the door. "Duck down, everybody!" he cried frantically. He raised a rifle to his shoulder. Screams, cries of horror. Chairs scraped against the concrete floor as we all ducked. "No!" I heard Mr. Faraday protest shrilly. "Carl, don't shoot him! It's a valuable gorilla! Don't!" The counselor took aim. An explosion ripped through the screams and terrified cries. The gorilla uttered a startled groan. Its big arms shot out at his sides. Its mouth dropped open. Its dark eyes bulged. The animal uttered a high whining cry. It grabbed at its chest and then it fell forward. Fell with a heavy thud. Dropped to the floor and didn't move. Chapter 11. The room grew silent. A few kids were still screaming. I heard some kids crying. I pulled myself back into my seat. The cord strained at my wrists. I could still feel the brush of the gorilla's arm on the top of my head. Chill after chill swept down my spine. Couldn't stop shaking. I gasped for breath. Alonzo and 2 counselors huddled over the gorilla. Alonzo tugged something from the gorilla's chest and handed it to the movie director. "A dart. A tranquilizer dart," Mr. Faraday announced, holding it high so everyone could see it. "We would never harm the best actor in a studio," he laughed. Kids groaned and sighed in relief. "Good job, everyone," Mr. Faraday declared. Alonzo and the counselor got the gorilla up on his feet. His big head rolled around groggily. On his shoulders, they pushed the dazed creature back into its cage. "Did we give you a good scare, Mr. Faraday? Did we make you believe?" Counselors moved up and down the tables, freeing our wrists from the cords. My heart was still pounding. Sweat poured down my forehead. My t-shirt stuck wetly to my back. "Believe!" Mr. Faraday cried, his eyes wild, gesturing with both hands. "Believe in terror!" I stared at him, studying him. How far will he go to scare us? I wondered how real would the terror be. I didn't have to wait long to find out. But Tyler and I went back to our cabin and finished unpacking. Taped up the posters on the wall beside my bed, but they didn't help cheer me up. I still felt frightened and tense. Tyler hunched on the edge of his bed, his arms crossed tightly in front of his chest. He hadn't said a word. He hadn't chewed his bottom lip, and now it was bleeding. He does that a lot when he's scared. "Maybe we should go home," he said finally. "Maybe this place is too scary. Faraday seems kind of crazy, doesn't he?" I shrugged. "You know we can't go home. You know Mom and Dad are away until August." Besides, it's all supposed to be fun, I said. I think Faraday was acting, but that gorilla was real, Tyler insisted, and so was the electric current in the cores. I felt it humming, and then it really jolted Chris. Maybe that was just an accident, I suggested. That Alonzo guy is so scary, my brother muttered. I glanced down at him. Tyler looked so small and pitiful, hugging himself like that. It made me laugh. Hey, lighten up, I cried. This is fright camp, right? It's just what you'd expect from R.B. Faraday, the scariest man on earth. I guess, Tyler stammered in a tiny voice. We didn't want to go to an ordinary summer camp, remember? This is gonna be exciting. I insisted Tyler's side. He rested his head on his fist. Cabin door swung open. Jack burst in, breathing hard. He wiped sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. Tyler jumped up from his lower bunk. Is Chris okay, he asked. I don't think so, Jack stammered. He swallowed hard and struggled to catch his breath. I went to the infirmary to see him. He messed up. He isn't right, huh? I gasped. What do you mean? He's talking crazy, Jack cried. He doesn't make any sense. I think the electric shock messed up his brain. It was real, I cried. It wasn't a fake. Jack shook his head. I warned you. Chris and I heard things when we arrived this morning. Frightening things. He lowered his voice. Tyler and I moved closer to hear him. I think it's really dangerous here, Jack continued. We have to stick together. The four of us, they've got their eyes on us. They're watching cabin 3. You see, Chris and I, he stopped with a gasp. He stared over my shoulder to the window. I turned and saw a face in the window. Alonzo staring coldly in at us, listening, spying on us. I turned back to Jack. His whole body shook. His face lost all its color. I didn't say anything, Jack whispered. If anyone asked, I didn't say a word. And then he pushed past me and bolted out of the cabin. I glanced back out the window. Alonzo had vanished. Tyler and I stared at each other. Weird, Tyler murmured softly. Yeah, weird, I replied. What did Jack start to tell us, I wondered. And why was he so afraid of Alonzo? Jack shook all over. He was totally terrified. Weird, I repeated to Tyler. And then I heard a shout. Let me go. A boy cried, please, let me go. Chapter 12. We both dove for the cabin door, got the first and leaped outside, ran out onto the path. Tyler came hurrying behind me. We both stared up the hill at Chris. He was sprinting wildly across the grass, running in crazy zigzags, waving his arms, whinnying, his head tossed back, whinnying like a horse as I gaped in shock, saw people chasing after him. 2 counselors and the camp nurse. One of the counselors leapt into the air and tried to tackle Chris from behind, but Chris made a sharp cut. Whinnying, he spun around and ran back up the hill. Let me go, he shrieked again. I won't tell anyone what I saw, I promise. 2 counselors tackled him. They pulled him to his feet and dragged him away. Chris returned to a cabin after dinner. He seemed okay. Tyler and I asked him what had happened. He turned away from us. I don't want to talk about it, he murmured. I saw his whole body tremble. Please, guys, don't mention it again, okay? We didn't say another word, but I kept glancing at Chris all night, wondering why they were chasing him and what they did to him after they caught him. After lights out, I watched him sitting up in his top bunk, staring out the window for hours, staring up at the moon, his expression grim, his body still as a statue. It rained early the next morning. We all watched an R.B. Faraday movie, except it was pretty good, and it took my mind off Chris. When the sun came out just before lunch, the grass sparkled like diamonds. The camp appeared fresh and new, as if the rain had cleaned everything in sight. Tyler and I had free time in the afternoon. Gus, a cabin counselor, called us aside. The spin and scream ride is ready if you want to try it out. He told us he didn't have to ask me twice. I love rides. The faster the better. I love the feeling of zooming and spinning out of control. I think roller coasters and other thrill rides are like scary movies. You feel as if you're really facing danger, but you know you'll be perfectly okay when the thrills are over. Tyler doesn't like rides as much as I do. He followed me down the hill to the spin and scream ride, but I could tell by the way he kept close to me that he was a little afraid. Hurry, I cried. I could see other kids running down to the ride. The little red and blue cars were filling up. I waved to Meredith and Elizabeth, but they didn't see me. Tyler and I climbed onto the last empty car, pulled down the safety bar over our laps. Do you think it spins real fast? Tyler asked in a tiny voice. He gripped the safety bar tightly with both hands. Probably not too fast, I replied, but I'll bet it spins a lot. I grabbed the wheel on the side. See, you turn this to make the car spin. He pushed my hand from the wheel. Don't make it spin too hard, okay? A big red-haired guy named Duffy was running the ride. I'd seen him early in the morning working out with weights in the exercise cabin. He had huge biceps and bolted out from a red muscle shirt. He wore tight black spandex bike shorts that showed off his powerful legs. I guess he wasn't a counselor since he didn't wear the green t-shirt and shorts uniform. The whole job is running the ride, I figured. Duffy came up to Tyler and me to check the safety bar. I saw the big blue and red tattoo of a grinning skull on his arm. Remember this ride in the movie? He growled. You mean Carnival of Disgusting Horrors? I replied, yeah, I remember it. Know why it's called the Spin and Scream? Duffy asked, flashing a toothy smile. He laughed. Hey, you'll find out. We watched him walk over to the controls. He grabbed a long wooden lever and pushed it forward. The car squeaked and groaned and then started to move. I counted 12 cars, all filled with campers. We began to spin in a wide circle. This is cool, Tyler declared. What's so scary about this ride? Nothing, it's just fun, I declared. We began to move faster. I spun the wheel and made a car twirl. Then I threw up my hands above my head. Had let out a happy cry. The wind blew my hair into my face. The car began to whirl faster. Whoa, I'm dizzy, I exclaimed. Tyler gripped the safety bar with both hands. They had a tight grin stuck on his face. I could see he was trying to enjoy the ride, but his eyes were shut and his face was starting to get quite pale. Faster, faster, the cars rolled faster, creaking and groaning. The cabins, the trees, the lake all became a bright sparkle and blur. We whipped around hard, spinning, twirling. I flew into Tyler. He gripped the bar, gritting his teeth. Faster, faster. I said, Duffy pushed the long lever down all the way. Whoa, I screamed. We're flying now. We're flying. Kids screamed and laughed as we whipped around. I saw Duffy turn away from the controls. I spun my head and saw him lumbering away, heading up the hill toward the lodge. I felt so dizzy, everything swirled past in a bright fuzzy blur. I blinked again. Hey, I called out to him, but my voice came out weak. No way it could be heard over the shouts and squeals of the kids on the ride. Hey, where's he going? Tyler demanded, squeezing my arm. I saw my brother's face twist in panic. Where's he going, Andrew? Isn't he gonna stop this thing? Chapter 13. The air with my face, my hair blew wildly. I lowered my hands to the safety bar and held on. We whipped around faster, faster. I fell against Tyler again. Then the car rocked me hard to the other side. Ow, I cried as I hit my arm. Then I bounced up out of the seat. The safety bar caught me. I fell back down to search for Duffy, but he had vanished into the spinning green and blue blur. No one there, no one at the controls. Kids squealed and screamed, "Stop this thing, somebody stop it, it's too fast." I feel sick. I started to feel sick too. My stomach turned, my mouth tasted sour. I could feel my lunch rising up to my throat. Dizzy, so dizzy. Where is that guy? He can't just leave us here, can he? Tyler was squeezing my leg. His eyes were shut. His mouth hung open in fear. We seemed to spin even faster. My head jerked back on my neck. My shoulder slammed into the side of the car. Over the screams, I heard a few kids crying now. I heard a loud groan and saw a splash of yellow. One kid did lose his lunch. I swallowed hard. I felt really sick now. I shut my eyes to make the dizziness fade, but it didn't help. Oh, I opened my mouth in a weak moan of horror. How long will we spin? How long? We whipped around again. Another kid sent a balloon of yellow vomit into the air faster, and then I saw a blurred figure in red and blue. Duffy, as the car flew around again. So I'm coming back down the hill, walking slowly, so slowly. Kids groaned and cried, "Hurry!" Someone screamed, "Please hurry!" We whipped around again. Duffy had a red soda can in his hand. He tilted his head back and took a long drink. Then he began slowly making his way toward us again. We spun around again. I held my breath. Finally, Duffy stepped up to the controls. We spun around again. Tyler's head bounced on his shoulders. His eyes were shut tight. "Tyler, are you okay?" I gasped. He didn't answer. We whirled around again. I saw Duffy grab the lever. Finally, I watched him tug the lever. No, I heard Duffy cry out, and I saw the lever break off in his hands. Chapter 14. No! Horrified groans and cries of terror rose up from the whirling, spinning cars. We roared around again. I saw Duffy holding the broken lever in one hand, scratching his head, staring at it. "Turn it off! Turn it off! Help us! Do something!" Angry, terrified voices rang out over the roar of the spinning cars. "Tyler, are you okay?" I shook my brother, shook him hard by the shoulder. He opened his eyes, then closed them again, bouncing hard on the metal seat. Hunched over the safety bar, the ground tilted up. I saw the sky crash into the grass. The green grass and the blue sky appeared to trade places. I'm going to faint, I realized. My head fell back and shut my eyes, and I felt the car slowing down. The roar of the motor cut off. We were spinning silently now. The air whooshing past, the metal cars creaking slower. I opened my eyes. I saw Duffy holding a heavy cord, holding a plug. He had unplugged the ride. We slowed to a stop. No one moved for the longest time. And then the kids began to climb out. Some dropped to their hands and knees on the grass. Others staggered weakly, holding their heads. Groaning and muttering angrily, I helped pull Tyler from the car. His knees started to buckle. I held him up till he caught his balance. Then we tried to walk. The ground tilted. Trees swayed in front of me as if they were rubber. I bumped right into Meredith and Elizabeth. "That was horrible," Elizabeth cried. Duffy loomed over us, a big grin on his face. "Enjoy the ride?" he asked, his pale blue eyes flashing merrily. "I'm gonna complain," Meredith snapped. "I'm gonna complain to Mr. Faraday." "Me too," her sister agreed. Duffy shook his head. "Didn't you see the movie?" he asked. "I don't care about the movie," Elizabeth snarled. "That was horrible. You made us all sick." "But that's exactly what happened in the movie," Duffy declared. "This is right, can't remember. The movie's come to life. I remember the scene in the movie now. The spin and scream kept whirling faster and faster until all of the riders lost their skin. And when the ride finally stopped, the cars were full of skeletons. "At least we didn't lose a skin," I muttered. Meredith squinted at me. "Are you okay?" "I'm still pretty shaky," I admitted. Tyler dropped onto the grass and lowered his head between his knees. "I feel sick," he groaned. "I really do." "Can't take a joke," Duffy cried. He shook his head in disgust, turned, and started jogging up the hill. "It wasn't a joke," Elizabeth called after him. "It was sick. Let's go complain to Mr. Faraday," Meredith insisted. "I'll bet he doesn't even know what that creep did to us." "Okay, let's go," I agreed. "We came here for fun, but so far it's all been a little too scary." I helped Tyler to his feet, then I started to follow Meredith and Elizabeth to the lodge. But I stopped after a few steps and stared up into a tall, leafy sassafras tree that rose up above the ride. "What is that?" I cried. "A camera?" Yes, all four of us saw it now. A camera perched on a low branch aimed down at the ride. Are we being watched? I wondered out loud. Do you think somebody taped us as we spun around? Is Mr. Faraday watching us? Meredith asked, frowning. Is he filming us? We definitely have to complain, Elizabeth said. He can't do that to us. This is crazy. We climbed the hill to the lodge and took a deep breath as we walked. I started to feel stronger. Then the dizziness faded away. Tyler's normal color returned. His expression remained grim. He clenched his jaw, but I could tell he was feeling a little better. We passed a row of trash cans along the side of the building. Something caught my eye. A head poking out from under the lid. I leaped back up as the head moved. An animal head. I saw now a raccoon. It glared up at us, then jumped out of the can and scampered for the trees. Whoa, I muttered, too many surprises here. Everything is making me jump. We entered the lodge and waited for our eyes to adjust to the dim light. Kids were working with clay in an arts and crafts group. As we passed the door, I saw ugly clay masks and monsters. We stepped past the big meeting room and mess hall. Inside, I glimpsed workers still cleaning up from lunch. Mr. Faraday's office stood at the end of a long wood hall. A sneaker thudded loudly on the wooden floor as we made our way quickly down the hall. Two green uniformed counselors passed us, heading the other way. How's it going? One of them asked pleasantly. We didn't reply. We passed an office marked camped assistant. That must be Alonzo's office. I realized another office had the words "Stay out" stenciled on the door. Mr. Faraday's office was closed. Meredith and Elizabeth hesitated. I raised my fist to knock on the door, but I left my fist in midair when I heard the first scream. A shrill scream of panic, a pain from inside the office, followed by another terrifying scream. I swallowed hard and turned to the others. Those screams, they sound real, I whispered. Chapter 15. Another scream made me jump back from the door. Silence now, the four of us exchanged glances. What should we do? Should we hurry away and pretend we hadn't heard anything? Or should we investigate? I raised my fist again and knocked on the door. Silence. I knocked again. Someone is in there, Elizabeth whispered. Why are they answering? Before I could reply, the door swung open and cracked. Who is it? A voice called. Mr. Faraday's voice. He peered out at us. The door swung open a few inches more. Mr. Faraday poked his head out. My mouth dropped open as I stared at him. His face was bright red. Sweat rolled down his forehead. Sweat drenched his beard. He was breathing hard. Mr. Faraday started. Are you okay? Took him a while to reply. He forced a smile to his lips and mopped sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. Just cooking up some movie magic, he said. Those screams, Elizabeth started. Sound effects, he answered quickly. He mopped more sweat. You know, I have a whole library of screams. He snickered. Screams for any occasion. He gazed hard at us as if trying to force us to believe him. But I didn't believe his explanation. The screams were too real. He was trembling all over and drenched in sweat. What was he doing in that office? I had to know. I reached out and I pushed the door open a bit wider. All four of us gasped when we saw the two creatures hunkered down at the back of the office. Were they human? Or were they animals? They had round, bald heads as green as melons, tiny black eyes above long lizard snouts, fat green bodies with bulging bellies. They lowered their heads and made loud snuffling sounds as the door swung open. Were they crying? I gasped again when I saw that their arms and legs were chained to the wall. Mr. Faraday quickly swung the door back. You shouldn't have done that, Andrew, he said coldly. But what are they? I choked out. Special effects, of course, he replied angrily. Do you think I keep real monsters in my office? Well, I could feel my face turning red. His narrowed his eyes menacingly. I don't like snoobs and troublemakers, Mr. Faraday said. You're in cabin 3, aren't you? Along with those other two troublemakers. But, I sputtered. His eyes glared coldly into mine. Well, Andrew, you and your brother are in the lucky cabin, he declared. Yes, you are very lucky indeed. What do you mean? I stammered. You get to find out what Fright Camp is really all about, he replied. Chapter 16. Faraday had to be telling the truth, Meredith said. Those were movie creatures. She tugged back her hair and tied it with a rubber band. Then she dropped onto the grass beside my cabin. Well, I never saw those guys in any movie, Tyler argued. And it didn't look like costumes. They were breathing. If they were just movie monsters, why did Faraday get so angry? I asked. Why did he threaten Tyler and me? The four of us had hurried away as fast as we could. Of course, we never even mentioned Duffy and the spin and scream. And now we settled in the shadow of my cabin, trying to calm down and trying to make sense of what we saw. The afternoon sun was slowly shrinking behind the trees. I could hear happy shouts and cries from the swimmers down at the lake. If they were just actors in costumes, Tyler said, why were they chained to the wall? Why were they screaming? Meredith interrupted. Yes, you heard those screams, her sister added. They sounded so real, they didn't sound like pretend screams. And why was Mr. Faraday so red and out of breath? Meredith demanded. I shrugged. Beats me. Can't answer any of those questions. It's all so weird, Tyler murmured. Everything about this place is weird, Elizabeth replied. It's a fright camp, right? I mean, we shouldn't believe anything we see. It's all just supposed to be scary fun. That's right, I sighed, but when does the fun start? Dinner in the big lodge was quiet. Food fight erupted at the table people on the far side. But after a few minutes of flying plates of lasagna and salad, the counselors got everyone to calm down. After the main course, the server tripped and dropped a big metal platter of ice cream dishes. That got everyone cheering and clapping. We stayed in the lodge and watched one of R.B. Faraday's scariest movies, The Cavern and No Return. Tyler and I own the video, and we watched it at least a dozen times. In the movie, teenagers go exploring in these big rock caves somewhere out west. They find a huge cavern that looks interesting. They make their way inside and slide down a steep slope deep into the mouth of the cavern. They explore for a while, but it's too dark to see anything, so they decide to climb back out, and that's when they run into major trouble because there's no way out. It really is a cavern of no return, and just when the teenagers realize that they are trapped in the cavern forever, they start to hear footsteps and weird rumbling growls, and they realize they are not alone. Cool plot, huh? I enjoy seeing the film on the big screen in the lodge. After the movie, Tyler and I were talking excitedly about what a classic it was as we made our way down the path to our cabin. A full moon lit away, the silvery light made the whole campground glow. Something caught my eye as we reached the first cabin on the path, a girl's cabin. I stopped and squinted up at the slanted roof. Was that a camera hidden under the eaves? Yes, another camera aimed at the path. Are the cameras everywhere? I wonder, is Faraday spying on us all the time? Is he filming us? I pointed it out to Tyler. He yawned. He's not used to staying up so late. Maybe it's for safety, he suggested. Yeah, safety, I repeated. It made sense, but I didn't believe it. Later, lying in the top bunk, I couldn't fall asleep. The light from the full moon made the cabin nearly as bright as during the day. I kept hearing moans and animal howls outside but nearby. I heard Tyler stir in the bunk beneath me. Andrew, do you hear those howls? He whispered. All part of fright camp, I told him. Just sound effects. There must be a loudspeaker outside the cabin. Are you sure? Jack asked, jumping out of his lower bunk. Chris lowered himself to the floor. What's going on? Who's crying out there? I slid out of bed and crept to the window. Others followed close behind, gazed onto the silvery grass. High on the hill, I saw two figures, dark against the shimmering trees. Squinting hard, I saw them tilt their heads back, cup their hands around their mouths, and then they howled like animals at the moon, the creatures from Faraday's office. How did they get free? Tyler asked, tugging my sleeve. What are they doing out there? Chapter 17. Oh, Jesus. Nobody heard the howling last night, no one except Tyler, me, Chris, and Jack. No one saw the two creatures high on the hill standing in the silvery moonlight, howling like animals. No one except Cabin 3. How could that be? I wondered as I grabbed a green towel from the pile and tossed it over my shoulder. Then I made my way along the narrow sandy beach to where the roped-in swimming area. I need to swim, I told myself. I just finished a 7-inning softball game under the hot sun. I was burning up. I waved to Tyler. He and several other kids were already in the water. It was his instructional swim period. The counselor was starting to demonstrate the butterfly stroke. Watch how I breathe, she said as I passed. Hey, you're not watching. The hardest part of the butterfly. Her voice faded behind the gentle lapping of the water. Wisps of white cloud floated high in the sky. The late morning sun beamed down, warming my shoulders, burning the back of my neck. I dropped my towel onto the sand and straightened the top of my baggy swimsuit. The lake sparkled brightly, reflecting the sunlight. I squinted at the water, wishing I'd remembered my sunglasses. I saw some girls swimming out to the floating platform. It bobbed in the water at the back of the roped-in area. Hey, Andrew, Andrew! I turned at the sound of my name and saw Meredith and Elizabeth stretched out on a beach house on top of the sand, sunning themselves. I waved to them, but I didn't go over. I needed to swim. I couldn't wait to cool off. Whoa! He dodged to the side. I turned and started to jog across the hot sand to the water. Nearly ran into Duffy, the big guy from the spin and skin ride. Whoa! He dodged to the side. He wore a black spandex racing suit. Silver whistle bounced on a chain over his broad chest. His whole body was perfectly tan. He greased up with suntan lotion. Welcome to the lake of the water zombies, he greeted me. What are you doing here? I blurted out. I'm lifeguard this morning, he replied. He slid silver-tinted sunglasses over his forehead, over his eyes. He turned to the water. Going in, I grunted yes and took off. If you see any water zombies, just shout, he called after me. Was that supposed to be a joke? Pretty lame, I thought. I remembered Mr. Faraday's Water Zombies movie. A bunch of people drown where the ship sinks to the bottom of the ocean. They come back to life as the swimming undead and terrorize divers who go down to explore the ship. Not one of my favorite Faraday films. I really like underwater movies, and I really didn't want to think about the evil underwater creatures when I was about to take a swim in a lake. Breathe now, breathe. I could hear my brother's counselor continue in a butterfly lesson. I took a deep breath and ran into the water. The cold water rose up over my ankles, up my legs. My toes sank into the soft sandy bottom as I ran. I ran into the cold water, rose up to my waist. And then I dove under, swimming hard, swimming out away from the beach. I bobbed up and took a deep breath, then I allowed myself to float on the gently rocking waves. Such clear, clean water. It felt so good. I dove back under, swam under the surface for a while. Then I floated up, pushed my hair back off my forehead, tilted my face up to the sun. I lowered my head and started to swim slowly, steadily out into the white floating platform. I was 4 or 5 strokes away from it when I felt something wrap around my ankle. At first, I thought it was a piece of seaweed, but then I felt it grip me, cold hard fingers tightening around my ankle, then tugging me down. Hey, I cried out in protest. I kicked hard, I thrashed the water with both hands, sucked in a deep breath. Let go! I squirmed and kicked, but the hard bony hand held on, tugging me underwater. I shot both hands up, reached up as if trying to grasp the surface, but I felt myself pulled down, kicking, thrashing, I spun underwater and saw a horrifying figure, all bones and torn skin, bones grasping my ankle, green skin floating loose off the bony chest. Its head was lowered as it held onto me, pulling me deeper underwater. I spun and kicked and struggled. My chest felt about to burst. My heart pounded as I stared through the murky tossing blue, stared at the undead creature, at the ribbons of flesh floating off the bones. I thrashed my arms wildly, bent my knees, kicked out with all my strength, but it held on, and then it slowly raised its head to me. In panic, in cold horror, I stared at the green bloated face, stared at it, Jack's face. Hey Marble, chapter 18. My chest burst in, I floated up, raised my arms, and floated to the top. Overcome with horror, with shock, I didn't feel him let go. I didn't see the bony fingers loosen their grip. I didn't see the creature back off. The creature with Jack's face, I shot up to the surface, burst over the top of the water. I let out a long whoosh of air, and sucked in fresh air with a gasping breath. I wanted to scream and breathe at the same time. I took another deep breath, then my heart thudded against my chest. I began to pull myself to the shore. Arms and legs aching, my strokes ragged and frantic. I hurtled over the water, desperate to get away. Was he chasing after me? Was he about to grab me again, pull me under and not let go this time? Shivering and shaking, I staggered onto the beach. I spun back to the water, my eyes narrowed, hugging myself tightly. No sign of him now. 3 girls sunbathing on the floating platform. My brother in his class practicing the new stroke. No one else that turned and tried to walk. My legs felt weak and rubbery. Duffy, I searched the beach for him. Gone, vanished once again. I opened my mouth in a furious cry. Was that Duffy's job to disappear when you really needed him? I stumbled down to the beach, searching for another counselor. Look out, I called to my brother's instructor. I clapped my hands around my mouth. Look out, he's in there, I cried. I put into the water, he's in there. She couldn't hear me. My words came out weak and breathless. Tyler gazed up at me and then quickly returned to practicing his stroke. Andrew, are you okay? Meredith and Elizabeth came running across the sand to me. Elizabeth grabbed my arm. What happened? We saw you stagger out. You look awful, her sister exclaimed. They both smelled of coconut suntan lotion. Meredith had a white coating of it on her nose. They studied me, the faces tight with concern. He's in there, I murmured. He grabbed me. Huh? Who grabbed you? Elizabeth demanded. He did. A creature, I replied. I pointed to the water. He's in there. I knew I wasn't making much sense. I still couldn't think clearly. The sunlight flashed in my eyes like 1,000 camera flashes. The beach spun wildly beneath me. He had Jack's face, I told him, but it wasn't Jack. It couldn't be Jack. Why not? Meredith asked. It was probably Jack playing a joke on you. No, it wasn't a joke, I cried. He tried to drown me. And Jack wouldn't try to drown me. You've been in the sun too long, Meredith said, or something. We'll help you to the nurse, Elizabeth offered. Then each took an arm and led me, dripping wet, up the path from the beach. By the time we reached the cabins, my heart stopped racing and I started to feel a little more normal. I didn't want to go to the nurse, I told him. I just want to go to my cabin. You should at least go tell the counselor, Elizabeth said. If Jack is playing dangerous games in the lake, it wasn't Jack, I insisted it was a creature. I'll tell the counselor later. First I want to get dried off and I want to sit down by myself and think. I have to figure out what is going on here. We stopped outside my cabin door. I thanked him for helping me up from the beach. Then I pushed open the door and I let out a startled gasp. All 3 of us stared at the message scrawled in red paint on the cabin wall beside my bunk. The horror is real. Get away while you can. Chapter 19. Oh, fuck. Was R.B. Faraday trying to terrify us? Was it all movie special effects? Or was something really dangerous going on here? Were the scrawled words a joke or a desperate warning? Was my life in danger? Tyler and Jackson, Chris's lives too? And where was Jack? Hadn't seen him all day. Was that really Jack under the water? Did Faraday turn him into a water zombie? Get a grip, I told myself, and I tried, I really did, but I kept hearing Faraday's words. Cabin 3 is the lucky cabin. You'll find out what Fight Camp is really all about. I had to talk to someone. I had to get some answers. At lunch, I searched for Gus, a counselor, but he was nowhere to be found, so I cornered the first counselor I found in the mess hall. Her name was Claire. She was tall, friendly-looking sports counselor with frizzy black hair pulled up on her head. You have to tell me the truth, I demanded. Is it all real? I had to shout over the clatter of dishes and loud voices that echoed across the big room. Claire led me away from the entrance. What's wrong? She asked, placing both hands on my shoulders. What's upsetting you? Is it real? I repeated. The scares, I mean. She narrowed her eyes at me. Are you too frightened? Just answer my question, I screamed. The electric shock the first day, the guys breaking the spinning screen, the word howls at night, and that creature in the lake. Someone tried to drown me today. A creature, Claire, studied me. I could see she was trying to decide what to tell me. Then she glanced around, checking to see if anyone was watching. Tell me, I insisted. I have to know what's going on. She lowered her head, bringing her face close to mine. You heard what Mr. Faraday said? She whispered. And he said thinks the horror has to be real to be scary. She glanced tensely up and down the long hall again. What does that mean? I demanded. Are you saying that was a real creature in the lake? Are you saying our lives are really in danger? I don't know, she stammered. I just know. Her voice trailed off. I followed her eyes. They stared at a camera perched above us in the corner of the hall. I can't say anymore, she whispered. She turned and ran to the mess hall door. I started after her, but I stopped when I heard familiar voices just inside the big room. You have to call your parents, I heard Chris say. No, I can't. I'm too afraid. Jack's replied. Jack, I bolted into the big room. You have to call your parents. You can't let them get away with that, Chris was insisting. No way. You know what he'll do to me. Jack cut his sentence short. As soon as he saw me, they both stared at me. I realized I'd interrupted something serious, but I didn't care. Jack had cried. Was that you? Underwater? Did you pull me under? Excuse me? Jack squinted at me. Are you making sense? I don't think so. Hello? Chris knocked on my head. Anyone in there? I shoved his hand away. Stop fooling around, I insisted. You weren't in the lake this morning? I asked Jack. No way, he murmured. I was flapping my arms and flying to Jupiter. Stop joking. I want to know the truth. What's going on here? I know that you two know. You both know. You've got to tell me. Jack and Chris exchanged glances. Then Jack grabbed my shoulder and pulled me closer. He lowered his mouth to my ear. It's too late, he whispered. Huh? I gasped. It's too late, he repeated. It's already begun. There's nothing we can do about it. Chapter 20. I don't understand, I stammered. You've got to tell me. I suddenly realized both boys weren't looking at me any longer. They were staring over my shoulder, staring in fright. I wheeled around and saw Alonso hovering over us. His strange gray eyes narrowed. The scar pulsed angrily over his eyebrows. Chris backed away. We didn't say anything, he cried to Alonso. We didn't tell him anything. Really, Jack insisted, his face going white. Troublemakers, Alonso muttered through gritted teeth. I've warned you before. No, please, Jack wailed. You have to believe us, Chris pleaded. Alonso scowled and waved them away. He sneered at me. You get to your table, too. Stop causing trouble, huh? Trouble, I gasped. I have my eye on you, Alonso warned. Cabin 3, the lucky cabin. He walked away laughing. They served some kind of stew for dinner. I didn't feel much like eating. I saw Tyler across the room laughing and joking with some new friends. Meredith and Elizabeth both stopped by my table to ask if I was feeling better. Said I felt okay. I didn't know what else to say. I poked a fork at my stew and thought about all that happened. Fright camp is supposed to be fun, I told myself, but I wasn't having any fun. I was too scared to enjoy myself. Was I being a wimp? No, I decided there was real danger here, real horror. Something evil was taking place here. I glanced down at the table at Jack and Chris. They were eating their dinner, hunched over the plates, eyes down, not speaking to anyone. They're terrified too. I realize they know what's happening in this camp, and they're terrified too. I wanted to call my parents. I wanted to tell them this camp wasn't working out, to come rescue Tyler and me before something terrible happened. But they were traveling around Australia all month. I had no idea how to reach them. I looked up from a plate and saw Alonso stride to the front of the room. I have an urgent announcement, he boomed. The big room instantly grew silent. Please pay attention, Alonso continued. The chef is worried that poison mushrooms were accidentally used in the stew. He believes the mushrooms were used on 2 plates. If your stew tastes funny, please report it immediately. Laughter burst out around the room. Mine tastes funny. Mine tastes weird. Mine tastes like garbage. More wild laughter. Hands were shooting up. Mine, no mine. Everyone enjoyed the joke, but Alonso's expression remained grim. This is no laughing matter, he shouted angrily. If a bad mushroom is used in 2 plates, we must find those plates. But why did you wait so long? Elizabeth called out. We're almost finished eating. Alonso opened his mouth to reply, but before he could get a word out, we all heard a loud groan, then a gasp of pain. I turned toward the sound and saw Jack and Chris grab the stomachs. Chris struggled to his feet, his eyes wide with horror, clutched his stomach and doubled over. Jack uttered a loud groan. It hurts, he moaned. Oh, my stomach, it hurts so bad. Both boys doubled over, groaning and clutching the stomachs. I think we found the 2 poison plates, Alonso declared. A strange smile spread over his face. I don't believe this, I thought. Jack and Chris poisoned? That's no accident. I leapt to my feet. And you're just gonna stand there? I cried to Alonso. Aren't you gonna help them? Alonso's smile faded, shook his head sadly. I'm afraid it's too late, he said softly. Everyone cried out as Jack and Chris crumpled to the floor. Chapter 21. Big room erupted in cries of panic, angry shouts. I jumped to my feet. I'm getting out of here now. I decided this place is sick. Counselors were dragging Jack and Chris to a side door. I ran down the long table and grabbed Tyler. Come on, I said, pulling him to his feet. We're getting out of here. He didn't hesitate. We both ran to the front door. We were only a few feet away when 2 gray uniformed guards stepped into the doorway to block the path. Whoa, Tyler and I stopped short, bumping into each other. Guards, I cried out. Since when does a camp have guards? The 2 men glared at us coldly and didn't reply. We want out of here, Tyler insisted. I don't think so, one of the guards sneered. Meredith and Elizabeth came running up behind us. We have to phone our parents right now, Elizabeth demanded shrilly. One of the guards thinking that isn't gonna happen. He told her flatly. I totally lost it. I spun around searching for Alonso. Are we prisoners here? I screamed over the shouts and cries of all the other campers. Are we prisoners? The guards herded us back to our cabin. Tyler and I slumped onto our bunks. Counselor poked his head into the window. Lights out now, he ordered. I didn't feel like arguing. I turned off the lights. What are we gonna do? Tyler asked softly. He leaned back against the wall, hugging himself. I don't know, I replied. Maybe we'll wait till everyone is asleep, and this is just like Prisoners of the Vampire King. Tyler said, remember that movie? The guards in that film were great too. I don't care about movies anymore, I replied bitterly. I'm never going to another R.B. Faraday movie as long as I live. I heard a soft whirring sound. Glancing up, I spotted a square object perched on a cabin rafter. I stood up to see it better. A camera whirring away. They're spying on us, I told Tyler. He stared up at the camera. Oh wow, he murmured. I shook my fist at it angrily. I don't care, I cried. I don't care what you do. We're getting out of here. I lowered my gaze to the bunk across the cabin. The empty bunk. Tyler followed my stare. Do you think Jack and Chris are okay? He asked in a whisper. I shrugged. I hope so. I crossed to the window and stared out in the silvery moonlight. Gray uniformed guards, at least a dozen of them, patrol the campgrounds. We'll never get anywhere tonight, I told my brother. Not with these guards out there. But we have to try, Tyler protested. Tomorrow morning, I whispered. Tomorrow morning we'll find a way to escape. I didn't get changed. I just pulled off my clothes and climbed under the covers. After a while, I drifted into a restless sleep. I tossed around, waking up every hour. Bits of ugly dreams lingering in my mind. A scraping sound, a soft thud. The noise made me open my eyes wide. I blinked several times, squinted in the blackness. I heard another thud, a clunking sound. A tiny circle of white light darted across the floor. Who's in here? I whispered. My throat caught from sleep. I sat up. Someone stumbled heavily across the room. Jack? Chris? I whispered. Is that you? No reply. A chill made me shiver. The glowing circle from the flashlight swept over the floor. One more time. Who's there? I cried. The cabin door swung open. The figure moved quickly, vanished out the door. The door slammed. I jumped to my feet and crossed unsteadily to the window. No one was out there. Now I clicked on the light. Tyler sat up in his bunk, shaking his head groggily. Someone was in here, I told him, and Tyler and I both gasped in shock. Chapter 22. My shoes, I cried. I dropped to my knees and reached under the bunk. Hey, I lowered myself to the floor and peered underneath. My sneakers, my shoes, and my sandals, I cried, turning to Tyler. All gone. Mine too, Tyler declared. He shook his head. I don't believe this. He took them all, I murmured. Someone came into the cabin and took all of our shoes. I heard excited voices outside. I jumped to my feet and ran out to see what was happening. Kids were pouring out the cabin. Some were dressed, some were in pajamas and nightshirts. They took my only pair of sneakers, a boy complained. They took my whole bag, a girl wailed. All my shoes. Meredith and Elizabeth hurried over to Tyler and me. Our shoes, Meredith cried. Do you believe it? Why did they do this? Tyler demanded. To keep us from escaping, Meredith said. There's no way we can make it through the woods without any shoes. The ground is crawling with snakes. I heard the counselor say so, but, Tyler sputtered. They can't do that. Back to your cabins, a guard's voice boomed through a megaphone. 30 seconds to get back to your cabin. Kids were running back and forth in a panic, still talking excitedly about the stolen shoes. Tyler and I shrank back into the deep shadows. Beside the cabin, Meredith and Elizabeth followed. We're trapped without our shoes, Elizabeth moaned. No, we have to escape, a voice cried. The three of us spun around. Jack and Chris appeared out of the darkness. They both looked really frightened. You're okay, I cried happily. Chris made a disgusted face. They pumped our stomachs, he groaned. But you're okay, I repeated. Yeah, I guess, Chris replied. But we don't have much time, we have to escape. Jack whispered. Why? What's gonna happen? I demanded. Jack and Chris exchanged glances. We might as well tell him, Chris said. It's too late now. Jack turned to us. Chris and I overheard the plans. We know the secret. That's why they've been picking on us. That's why they chose cabin 3. We're all in danger, Chris added breathlessly. Meredith and Elizabeth too, because they're your friends. But what? I demanded. What are they planning to do? They want to scare us to death, Chris exclaimed. Chapter 23. 15 seconds of God's metallic voice through the megaphone made us all jump. Back to your cabins. Final warning. Gross. Shit. 15 seconds of God's metallic voice through the megaphone made us all jump. Back to your cabins, now, final warning. They want to scare us to death, Chris repeated in a whisper. It's some kind of weird experiment or something. Does Faraday know about it? I asked. Chris shrugged. We don't know. We only know they're not kidding around. They want to see how much fear a kid can take before he croaks. Elizabeth gasped. But they can't do that. Our parents. I called my mom, Jack whispered. There's a payphone in the infirmary. I called her to get here as fast as she can. Do you think? I started. She'll be here tomorrow morning, Jack said. She can save us all. He swallowed hard. If it isn't too late. I let out a sigh of relief. What are you kids doing out here? A big beefy voice guard lurched around the side of the cabin. His eyes narrowed in anger. Get to your cabins now! Meredith and Elizabeth let out shrieks and took off. Tyler, Jack, Chris, and I trudged into cabin 3. I shut the door hard behind me. Our bare feet slapped against the wooden floor. I saw that Jack and Chris had no shoes either. On the rafter above us, the camera continued to work. Do you really think your mom can get us out of here? Tyler asked Jack. Jack nodded. I saw a glint of light on the back of his neck, the moonlight reflecting off of something. I stepped over to him to get a closer look and gasped when it came into focus. Small metal chip implanted in the skin behind his ear. I spun around and spotted a chip behind Chris's ear too. What did they do to you? I cried. What are those things they planted in you? Jack and Chris both stared back at me blankly. Things? What things? Chapter 24. Next morning, we walked barefoot across the wet grass to get breakfast. A red ball of sun hung heavily over the trees. Black clouds over the lake darkened the beach. Below us, stern-faced guards watch our every move. Angry and frightened, kids muttered to each other. A camera over the mess hall doorway caught our unhappy expressions as we entered. Tyler, Meredith, Elizabeth, Chris, Jack, and I sat in a row at the back table closest to the door. We wanted to be ready to sneak out as soon as Jack's mom arrived. Silence. Voices usually rang out through the big room, but this morning the only sounds were clatter of spoons against cereal bowls and some sniffing and coughing. But as soon as Alonzo appeared in the front fireplace, the room exploded in voices. He was barraged by angry questions. Why did you take our shoes? Are we prisoners? Why do you have guards? Can we call home? Can we leave this camp? Are you gonna give us back our shoes? Give us our shoes! Give us our shoes! Campers at the front table began to shout, and the chant quickly spread over the entire hall. Alonzo stood perfectly still, his face a blank. Finally, he raised both hands above his head for silence. We have only borrowed your shoes, he declared when the chanting stopped and the room finally quieted down. Your shoes were taken for your own protection. Those words caused another explosion of angry voices. Once again, Alonzo waited for quiet. His voice reddened and his face reddened as he waited. The scar on his forehead throbbed. We have heard some frightening stories, he explained. Some frightening things in the woods. We took your shoes to keep you all close, but don't worry, you will get them back when it's safe again. Alonzo continued talking, but his words were drowned out by boos and angry shouts. He motioned frantically for silence. Someone threw grapefruit half at him. He ducked. The grapefruit bounced off the stone fireplace. Kids cheered. Another grapefruit half went flying. Someone tossed a cereal bowl, smashed against the wall. Guards rushed to the front of the room to protect Alonzo. Over the shouts and cries, I heard a high scream. Woman screamed from outside. I saw Jack's eyes go wide. Mom, he gasped. That's my mom. He leaped away from the table and tore out through the door. Tyler and I scrambled out behind him. Mom, Jack called. The storm clouds had rolled overhead. I squinted into the gray. It was nearly as dark as night. Help! Another high scream from near the trees. This way, I cried and began running toward the sound. I saw two green uniformed counselors running full speed in the other direction. Help me! Jack's mom shrieked. Jack spotted her first. She's in the quicksand pit. Did they throw her in? Did they? Jack, get help! She cried. She flailed both arms above her head. The sand was up over her waist. She was sinking fast. Jack started to run to her. No! I cried and grabbed his shoulders and jerked him back. You'll sink too! Get a rope! Elizabeth shrieked. Get a tree branch, something for her to hold on to. Help me! I'm going down! Jack's mom wailed. She stabbed at the sand frantically with both hands, grasping handfuls, struggling desperately for something to hold her up. Hurry! Hurry! She cried. The sand rose up to her chest. Get help! Get help! Tyler cried. I had an idea. I'm gonna get Mr. Faraday. I told them. I spun back to the main lodge. He'll help us. I know he will. Just hurry! Jack's mom pleaded. I heard a rumble of thunder as I took off toward the lodge. Gasping for breath, I burst past a guard at the door and turned down the long hall. Hey, wait! He called after me, but I was already halfway to Mr. Faraday's office at the end of the hall. Mr. Faraday! Mr. Faraday! I called his name as I ran. We need help! The office door stood open. He had to be in there. He had to. I grabbed the sides of the doorway and pushed myself inside. Mr. Faraday! I called breathlessly. No, not at his desk. Mr. Faraday! I heard the sound of a car starting up. The window stood open. The curtains fluttered in a gusting wind. A rumble of thunder, then the roar of a car engine. I dove to the window, leaning on the ledge. I poked my head out and saw a black car squealing away, tires spinning over the dirt path. And Mr. Faraday's car, I could see him hunched forward, both hands on the top of the wheel, roaring down the hill, away from the camp. Hey, where are you going? Called after him, but of course he couldn't hear. With a sigh, I ducked back into the office. I stared to the door when something on his desk caught my eye. A note, a handwritten note. My hand shook as I grabbed it off the desk and read it aloud. I can't do this. I can't do this to these kids. Feel so guilty. I'm so sorry. Goodbye, everyone. Chapter 25. I gaped at the words until they blurred in front of my eyes. I let the note fall to the desk, turned to the door and gasped. Reading other people's mail, Alonzo asked, a leering smile on his face. You know that isn't right, Andrew. He had dark stains over the front of his white lab coat. He moved quickly to block the door. Jack's mom had choked out. You've got to hurry. Too late, he said softly. No, I screamed. We don't like uninvited guests at fright camp, Alonzo said. No, that's horrible, I cried. Alonzo stepped aside. Two guards moved quickly into the room and grabbed me by the shoulders. I thrashed and squirmed and tried to struggle free, but they were too strong. They started to drag me out the office. I spotted a camera aimed down at us from a high bookshelf. What is that camera for? I asked Alonzo. Why are the cameras all over the camp? Don't ask any more questions, he replied coldly. You've already seen too much. They pulled me out into the hall. Where are you taking me? I demanded. To join your brother and the other troublemakers, Alonzo said. They're waiting for you, Andrew, in a place you find very interesting. Are they okay? I cried. Is everyone okay? Alonzo didn't answer. He led the way into the woods. The guards gripped my arms tightly. We followed a path I'd never seen before. Watch out for the snakes, Andrew, Alonzo grinned. A cold rain came down, drenching my hair and the sleeves of my t-shirt. I trained my eyes on the ground looking for snakes. I listened hard for hissing and rattling, but no ring drowned out any sound. Alonzo shoved me ahead of him on the path and led up to a dark rock cliff. Cut into the cliff, I saw a small open in, a cave, totally black inside. A wooden sign tilted into the cave, open in. Mine, lost souls. What is this place? I asked Alonzo. Am I going in there? He nodded. Your friends are already inside, Andrew, and they're waiting for you. The guards forced me up to the opening, but what's in there? I demanded. Why do we have to go in? The only reply I received was a hard push. I stumbled into the darkness. A sharp rock scratched my bare foot. I tumbled down, started to fall, slid down into the blackness, down, rolling as I fell down deeper and deeper into an endless, bottomless hole. My screams followed me all the way down. Oof, I landed hard on my side, a cold hard floor, the floor of a mine shaft. I realized I pulled myself up to my knees and blinked several times, trying to blink away the darkness, but I was surrounded by solid black. I couldn't see a thing. I shivered, the air felt cold and damp. Hello, I called weakly, my voice echoed around the deep cavern. Anyone down here? Andrew, is that you? My brother's voice from somewhere in front of me. Tyler, are you okay? A hand bumped me, slid across my face, landed on my throat. Andrew, it's me, Tyler uttered in a tiny, trembling voice. Are you okay? They threw you down here too? Yes, I told him. I squeezed his cold, wet hand. Who else is down here? We all are, Elizabeth replied. My sister and I, Jack and Chris. Jack, your mom had choked out. I know, he whispered. Chris and I tried to save her, but he stopped short. A low growl from somewhere close made us all gasp. A low animal growl. Oh no, I moaned. My heart skipped a beat. My knees started to buckle. We're not alone down here, I realized. We're not alone. Chapter 26, we all cried out at the next low growl, closer this time, angrier. What is that? I choked out, my heart beat so hard, my head throbbed, I couldn't think straight. It sounds hungry, Tyler gasped. It's so dark, Jack whispered. If only we could see something. Whoa, wait, Chris murmured. I have a plastic lighter in my pocket. One of the counselors dropped it. Hold on. I held my breath, tried to force my legs to stop trembling. I waited for the flicker of Chris's lighter. Ow, I let out a shrill cry as bright lights flashed on. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them slowly and stared at Mr. Faraday, grinning across the crowded room at us. We weren't in an empty mine shaft. We were standing in a large round room filled with counselors and guards. The start and folding chairs, and all burst into applause as my startled brother and friends and I gaped, open-mouthed at them. Mr. Faraday clapped too, grinning and nodding his head. Wonderful! That was wonderful! He declared. I shook my head hard. Was this a dream? I felt too confused to say anything. You kids are perfect, Mr. Faraday declared. He rushed up and started pumping our hands. Wonderful, wonderful! You were all so terrified! The counselors and guards gave us another round of applause. Mr. Faraday turned to Alonzo, who was standing against the back wall. Are the cameras still running? You can turn them off now. Then the movie director swung back to us. Let's give special thanks to the actors who played Jack and Chris, he exclaimed. Huh? Actors, I cried. Even more confused, more applause. Jack and Chris took bows. Wonderful job, boys. Mr. Faraday congratulated them. You all really fooled everyone. You were perfect campers. No one guessed that you were staff members working for me. I grabbed Jack's arm. You're an actor? He nodded, grinning at me. None of that stuff was real, I demanded. The electric shock, the food poisoning? His grin grew wider. You catching on, Andrew? The creature in the lake, I cried. The one with your face, the costume. I waited behind the floating platform for you. He pulled the little chip out from behind his ear. It's a microphone, he told me. That's how I got my instructions from Mr. Faraday. Didn't you wonder why all the terrible things were happening to us guys and Kevin through the actor who played Chris Sass? We were all set up to frighten whoever ended up in the lucky cabin. And I also want to thank Max, who played the part of Duffy. Mr. Faraday continued. More applause. And a special thanks to Margot, who played Jack's mom. Great job in the quicksand pit, Margot. Mr. Faraday turned to the back of the room. And a special thanks to my brother Ned, who played the part of Alonzo. More applause as Alonzo or Ned took a bow. Hey, what's the big idea? I cried angrily. Why did you do this to us? Why did you trick us? Elizabeth demanded. Mr. Faraday crossed the room, put an arm around my shoulder and his other arm around Elizabeth's shoulder. You are in my new movie, he announced. My first documentary. But, Tyler sputtered. Mr. Faraday continued. You probably saw the cameras around camp. I wanted to capture real terror on film. Not movie terror, but real terror. I wanted to use all of my tricks to frighten you, scare you out of your minds. I wanted it to be real, and it worked. You were wonderful. I shoved his arm away and spun around to face him. Anger rose up from my chest and burst out in a furious cry. It was all fake, I shrieked. You frightened us like that just for a movie? Nothing was real? Mr. Faraday smiled. smile faded. He rubbed his beard. Well, actually, Andrew, some things here are real. What? I demanded. What is real? It's not important, he replied sharply. The important thing is I captured your fear on film. You're going to be famous. But it wasn't fair, Elizabeth chimed in. You should have warned us. Tyler and Meredith agreed. All four of us began angrily shouting at once. Mr. Faraday raised a hand to silence us. Calm down, everyone. Now you kids can relax and have fun. Enjoy the camp. You've earned it. Tyler, Meredith, Elizabeth, and I hurried out. We returned to our cabins, changed into a swimsuit, took a long, cool swim in the lake. The camp looked entirely different to me now. The quicksand pit, the cavern of no return, the haunted forest, and none of it seemed scary anymore. Now I knew the secret. It was all like a movie, he said. I'll pretend, built so that Mr. Faraday could feel my fear. I'm still angry, I told the others as we dried off on the beach. That guy who played Jack nearly drowned me, pulling me under in that gross costume. I'm angry too, Meredith agreed. It wasn't fair. We came here to have fun. He used us, Elizabeth declared. Tyler wrapped himself in a beach towel. He shivered. It was too scary, he said. It was like we were victims. We never had a chance. We huddled on the beach and talked about it for a long time. All four of us couldn't calm down. We felt angry and upset. We have to make a protest, I said. Finally, Faraday and the others don't have the right to scare us like that. They went too far. We have to let people know what he did to us. The others cheered. A shadow slid over us, and I saw Ned, Mr. Faraday's brother, watching us from the rocks above the sand. Did you hear what I was saying? I felt the chill as I gazed up at him. His strange gray eyes narrowed coldly. The scar on his forehead throbbed. The scary stuff is over, I thought. Why is he staring at us like that? Chapter fucking 27. After lunch, we spent the afternoon having fun. We raced the go-karts over the trail that stretched along the trees. The trail was bumpy and filled with rocks. We practically flew over it, shrieking and screaming our heads off with each bump. We rode the spin and scream until we were so dizzy that we couldn't stop laughing. We sailed sunfishes out on the lake, and then we tried windsurfing, which is a lot harder than it looks. After a late afternoon swim, we headed back to the cabins to get changed for dinner. Kids were already gobbling down hot dogs, baked beans. When I arrived at the mess hall, some of them glanced up as I walked in. A few clapped and cheered, others flashed me a thumbs up. I guessed that the story of the lucky cabin had gotten around. I grabbed a plate and walked up to the hot dog line. As I waited, I searched for Jack and Chris, but of course they weren't at their usual places. Mr. Faraday had probably paid them for their acting jobs and they had left the camp. Mr. Faraday waved at me from the front table. He sat surrounded by counselors. His brother Ned sat at the far end of the table, leaning over a plate piled out with food. I took a seat across from Meredith. She was talking to another girl from a cabin. I was halfway through my second hot dog when I jumped to my feet. Hey, where's my brother? I shouted. I saw Mr. Faraday turn toward me. Where's Tyler? I cried. He was right behind me. Called his name several times. The room grew quiet. Is there a problem, Andrew? Mr. Faraday asked. My brother, I replied. He told me he was starving, but he isn't here. Maybe he's still in your cabin, Ned suggested. I started to the door. I'll go check. This is weird. Don't be upset. I'll go with you, Mr. Faraday offered. He hurried across the room to catch up to me. I led the way down the path to the cabin. Stopped short when I saw the cabin door hanging open. Mr. Faraday and I hurried to the open doorway. Oh no, I let out a cry. What a mess. The cabin had been trashed. Blankets and sheets had been pulled off the bunks and crumpled over the floor. One dresser lay on its side, clothes pouring out of the drawers. One window screen had a big hole ripped in it. Mr. Faraday gasped and raised both hands to his face. It looks like there was a fight, I exclaimed in trembling voice. Stay calm, Mr. Faraday instructed. I'm sure everything is okay. Oh no, I pushed him past him into the cabin, bent to the floor and picked up an object from under our bed. I held it up to Mr. Faraday. My brother's watch, I cried in horror. He never takes it off, never. I don't understand this, Mr. Faraday stammered. This shouldn't be happening. The filming is over. Then where is my brother? I shrieked. Chapter 28. Mr. Faraday swallowed hard. I don't know who did this, he murmured, staring at the mess. We'll split up and search for him. He's got to be nearby. He blew his whistle. Several counselors came trotting down the hill from the mess hall and returned our sneakers. Maybe Tyler wandered down to the quicksand pit, I suggested in a tiny voice. Mr. Faraday shook his head. It isn't really quicksand, it's just a pile of sand. We spread out. He turned to the counselors. Search the camp for Tyler, his brother, he instructed them. But before they could move, Meredith appeared. Her hair was wild around her face. Her features were tight with fear. My sister is gone too, Meredith wailed. I thought she was in our cabin, but she isn't. I haven't seen Elizabeth since we left the beach. Mr. Faraday put a hand on her trembling shoulder. Whoa, stay calm, everybody. Take a deep breath. I'll bet Tyler and Elizabeth are both down at the beach. The director was trying to sound calm, but I could see the flash of fear in his eyes. His upper lip trembled. He bit down on it to stop it. He half ran, half walked down the path to the beach. Meredith and I hurried after him. The cabins were all dark. A steady breeze made the tall grass whisper as we raced by in the gray evening light. I could see that the beach was empty. Meredith let out a sob. She ran ahead of Mr. Faraday, her sneakers kicking up the sand. It's getting dark, Faraday said, his eyes searching the beach. Hard to see if Meredith's scream interrupted him. Look, she cried. She bent down and picked something up off the sand. Huh? Mr. Faraday uttered a gasp. It's Elizabeth's swimsuit, Meredith wailed. Mr. Faraday's mouth dropped open. It's hers, Meredith shrieked at the top of her lungs. She waved the swimsuit in the air. Where is she? Where's my sister? We all looked out to the water. The lake shimmered darkly in the evening light. This can't be happening, Mr. Faraday moaned, shaking his head. He took a deep breath. Let's get back to the lodge. Maybe someone is seeing Elizabeth and Tyler. Where is she? What happened to her? Meredith cried as we made our way back up the hill. I'll phone to the town police, Mr. Faraday promised. I don't want your kids to worry. We all stopped when we saw the spin and scream ride going. The cars were spinning slowly, creaking and squeaking as they spun. Who turned that thing on? Mr. Faraday demanded. What's going on around here? We jogged towards the whirling ride. There's Tyler, I cried, pointing to one of the cars. Look, there he is. Tyler. Mr. Faraday grabbed the lever and pulled it up. The cars rolled slowly to a stop. All three of us ran across the grass to the car. Tyler? I called. Tyler? No, not Tyler. We stared down in horror at Tyler's clothes spread over the seat. Chapter 29. Mr. Faraday opened his mouth in a gurgling sound. He staggered back away from the car. Meredith grabbed Mr. Faraday by the arm, started to shake him wildly. Stop it, she cried. You're still trying to scare us. You're still making a stupid movie. No, I'm not, Mr. Faraday insisted. He pulled free of her grasp. Trust me, Meredith, I'm through filming. I don't know who is doing this. Well, what are we gonna do? I demanded. Tyler and Elizabeth wouldn't just wander away. Mr. Faraday began trotting to the lodge. I'm going to call the police, he said. This is real. It isn't a movie. We'll come with you, I said. We followed him into the lodge. Dinner was over. The movie screen had been set up, and the rest of the kids were watching one of Mr. Faraday's movies. Saw the giant insects as we passed the main hall and recognized the movie Night of the June Bugs. Meredith and I were definitely not in the mood for a horror movie. Mr. Faraday clicked on his office light and we followed him inside. Sit down, he motioned to the two chairs across from his desk. I'm sure the town police will help us. He picked up the phone receiver and raised it to his ear. Hey, he held the receiver out and looked at it, and then he punched several buttons. Then he listened again, and when he raised his eyes to us, his whole body trembled in panic. The phone is dead, he choked out. He slumped into his desk chair. Who's doing this? Chapter 30. Try another phone, I cried. Try something. We have to get help. Two counselors burst into the office. I think we found them, one of them cried breathlessly. Where? I cried. We heard voices, the other one said, struggling to catch his breath. From down in the cavern to no return. But that's impossible, Mr. Faraday exclaimed. How did they get down in the cavern? Who put them there? We've got to get them out, I cried. A large figure came hurrying down the hall toward us. I recognized Ned, still wearing the same white lab coat. What's going on? He asked his brother. Just grab some flashlights. Mr. Faraday replied. We're going to the cavern. Ned's mouth dropped open in surprise. Then he spun around and lumbered off to get the flashlights. A few minutes later, we were making our way quickly through the trees. Our flashlights dancing over the ground in front of us. The cavern of no return was cut into a rock wall hidden deep in the woods. There was no path, so we had to stop over fallen tree limbs, push our way through thick tangles of vines and tall weeds. Crickets chirped noisily all around. I could hear animals scampering over crackling dead leaves. Finally, the cavern rose up darkly ahead of us. The mouth of the cavern was a small hole cut low, only a foot or two high. We dropped to our knees in front of it. Mr. Faraday hesitated. This is too dangerous. We really shouldn't go in there. Dangerous, Meredith cried. I don't care. My sister is in there. We have to find her. You don't understand, Ned began. I turned and lowered myself into the open end. I'm going to find Tyler, I declared. No, wait, Mr. Faraday insisted. Too late. I slid into the blackness. Whoa, I cried out as I began to tumble down a steep path. Down into the cavern. I caught my balance and stumbled down to the cavern floor. My shallow breath rose up loudly, echoing against the stone walls. A few seconds later, I saw darting yellow circles of light as Ned, Meredith, and Mr. Faraday made their way down into the cavern. A chill swept down my back despite the summer heat. It was cold down here. Mr. Faraday bumped into me. Oh, sorry, he muttered. Even in the dim glow of the flashlights, I could see the terrified expression on his face. Who's down here? He stammered. Is anyone down here? Tyler? Elizabeth? Are you down here? Chapter 31. I heard a soft moan from somewhere ahead of us. Mr. Faraday jumped. He heard it too. A soft cry. Who's here? Mr. Faraday gasped. Please? Who is it? Lights flashed on above us. We all blinked in the bright light. Tyler and Elizabeth stood against the wall, both dressed in jeans and bright camp sweatshirts. Surprise! They both cried and burst out laughing. Meredith and I laughed too. Mr. Faraday and Ned staggered back, their mouths open, eyes bulging. We paid you back, Meredith exclaimed. She slapped her sister a high five. You mean you staged this whole thing? Mr. Faraday cried. Elizabeth and Tyler didn't disappear. It was all a fake? Ned asked weakly. We all laughed again. What an awesome moment. Yes, we planned the whole thing. Now you know what it feels like to be really terrified, I told them. Too bad we don't have a camera, Elizabeth cried. We can make our own movie about fear. We laughed again. We congratulated each other. We were so happy our plan had worked. We felt so good. We scared the scariest man on earth, I cried gleefully. But then I caught the worried expressions on the faces of the two men. Mr. Faraday had his head tilted as if he were listening for something. I guess the great horror director doesn't like it when someone tries to terrify him. I decided, Mr. Faraday, I started. Shh! He held a finger up to his lips. Listen, we stopped our celebration and listened. I heard a low buzz, rising and falling. What is that? I asked. Mr. Faraday still had his finger to his lips. The buzzing grew nearer, louder, rising and falling, like a low droning sound. What's that noise? I asked again. Tyler, Meredith, and Elizabeth huddled close. Faraday rubbed his beard tensely. He shut his eyes. Remember when I said some things here at camp were real? He asked in a whisper. I struggled to hear him over the rising buzz. The covered in a giant wasp nest, he continued. The wasps and hornets all swarm here at night. I started toward the opening. I opened my mouth to say, let's get out of here, but panic gripped my throat. Let's climb out of here, Meredith said it for me. Can't, Mr. Faraday said flatly. The climb is too steep. It's a cavern of no return, remember? Ned chimed in. We were trapped down here until someone comes to rescue us. Trapped with them, Mr. Faraday added, motioning towards the buzzing. Louder, louder. Pretend time is over. Now we're gonna face real terror, Mr. Faraday said, softly shaking his head. No, I protested. We gotta get out. We can't. I had to shout over the rising buzz of the wasp swarm. My legs trembling. I started to back up from them. Back. I tripped over something, stumbled backwards. Hey! I scrambled to my knees and stared at the loudspeaker. I tripped over loudspeaker, raised it to my ear, heard the buzzing sound pour out of it. Sound effects. My heart still pounding. I turned back and Mr. Faraday, he grinned down at me, a gleeful, triumphant grin. Are you enjoying fright camp? He asked. Just think, you have 2 more weeks. Oh my goodness. Gentlemen, that is the fucking whole book. I don't think it was actually as good a run as the one that I